your favorite time of day. Oh my goodness. I have been in a pain flare for the last few days. I know many of you share my experience. Hi, Michelle. Welcome. I'm Katie. I'm here to share some ideas and discuss a little bit the concept of, I'm not sure how, I want to talk about hierarchies and other ways of contemplating like how we structure thought and create orders, because it doesn't all have to be a flow chart from your like an organization flow chart. There are other ways to group information, to group concepts that guide us more towards resonance in our nervous system than they do towards regulation. And I'm clever, but I'm not so smart that I don't ever need a resource. So I'm actually going to grab my book, which you do not need to have, but it is called Neuroaffective Somatics. Hi, Kat. Hi, Michelle. And I wrote this in large part because I had a stroke in 2019. And then I had cancer in 2020, and I navigated all of that successfully alone. And there's no logical reason that I even survived my stroke, much less also cancer. So I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I will spend some time and prove polyvagal theory. I will use everything that I've learned from all of the time I have spent with Bessel VanderKolk, Stephen Borges, Peter Levine, training with them directly. And I will go back to what they taught me and find the parts of polyvagal theory that show why I was successful. And I was like really happy and excited about that. So I went back into the literature, and within a day of contemplation, it came to be very obvious to me that polyvagal theory does not work in practice. It's based on a model of hierarchy, and our bodies don't operate through hierarchy. It's also based on this idea of regulating our nervous system, and the way that regulatory factors and like regulatory switches and different kinds of processes occur in our body. Those are, especially when you attach it to the vagus nerve, they are completely automagic. The polyvagal people call it autonomic. That's the correct science term, but I like automagic. There are so many things that our body does, whether or not we ask it to. And one of those things is how our vagus nerve innervates and relates to and literally goes through all of our, so much of our major organs, so many, like our whole body. And I was like, wow, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. How did I do it then? So let me tell you like a little bit about polyvagal theory. I'm going to do it from my little book here. It's called Neuroaffective Somatics. I'm very today, and please ask me questions. Please, please. First of all, polyvagal theory. Okay, it is distributed in industry through psychiatry. Polyvagal theory of neuroscience shows up in our lived experience as psychiatry. Psychiatry, just from a practical perspective, in the US, I can't speak to other countries, but here in the United States, psychiatry is aligned to the courts. It is not aligned to hospitals. So if you've ever had to call 911 for a friend having a mental health crisis, the police show up, not an ambulance. And I think that's really important to be aware of when we're talking about regulating ourselves through challenge and turmoil, that the efficacy and the success of that is, how does psychiatry label you and me okay? And we're typically labeled okay because of how we're behaving, not because of what we're experiencing. Big generalization, and generally true. The other thing that Polyvagal does is he has what he calls 3 states of arousal. I have a little thing here. So let's take a look. In the Polyvagal Theory, my channel have influenced you to begin college. Oh, Sherry, that's amazing. Good for you. Are you gonna like major in something? Or you're just like hanging out in college? That is so cool. What a wonderful influence to have had. Biotech. Wow. You go. That means you can do math. I'm jealous. I have gone to great lengths to avoid math. I created a whole new framework. That is so awesome. Well, I'm really happy for you. That's great. Yay. The most dangerous population is a literate one, by the way. So, okay, so polyvagal theory says that we have 3 states of our automagic nervous system, 3 different states. One is social engagement. One is ventral. I'll show you where these are. One is sympathetic, and one is dorsal. And these are not in a hierarchy. This is just like the order in which I wrote about them. What Dr. Borges calls our ventral vagal system is the part of our nervous system that, oh, yay, hi, Molly. The part of our nervous system that's in the front of us, ventral, this is the ventral side of human. Our dorsal side would be where our dorsal fin would be if we were living in the ocean, which we aren't. First problem. Big one. The ventral vagal state is where polyvagal theory places this concept of social engagement. So I'm talking about how I originally went to prove polyvagal theory right, and then ended up creating a new system because it failed. So social engagement is a concept in like evolutionary biology, and in certain parts of cognitive science, I've run across it as well, where scientists will look at different species of animals and how they do their existence. So bees have social engagement, great apes have social engagement, orcas have social engagement. But what Stephen Borges calls social engagement is if you're a little baby and I'm a grown-up and I hold you and I look down at you like this and I'm smiling at you and you smile back, that is social engagement. That does not exist anywhere outside of polyvagal theory. That was very interesting to me when I learned that, because I was like, well, so where does polyvagal theory get this idea of social engagement? He calls it the ventral vagal complex. I think what he has renamed is our cardiac plexus, we have a whole bundle of nerves that comes together right around heart and pericardium called the cardiac plexus. And one of the first things that goes wonky when we're experiencing stress is our breathing and our heart rate. So, but it's not fucking social engagement. It's a whole carotid complex. I'm going to pull up the Nijing 2 so we can just look at like an artistic variation of what the nervous system might look like. And my phone is taking some time. I need to get it up here. I'm streaming on a couple places, so just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. I came with a concept, but not a whole big, what's the word? I didn't come like with a prepared lecture. That rarely happens in these lives. For the people in the LinkedIn lands, I'm going to show it to you as the Nijing 2 with all of its, with all of its background. And for some reason, I'm not able to change what's happening in, okay, we're going to do it this way. We'll just do it by hand, old school. So we're going to pretend like this is your nervous system, okay? And we can, because it's a visualization of our corpus callosum. This is a medical chart from Chinese medicine. It's a later chart. This is 17th century. So whoever designed this had access to things like the taxonomy of species. There had already been tons of dissection of human brains. The Chinese knew very well human anatomy. And so just as like a idea, okay, anything forward of your spine is ventral. Anything on the back end is going to be dorsal. So ventral, dorsal. Ventral vagal is happening right here where this inner child is on the star bridge. This is a metaphor. But he says that when the ventral vagal system, which does not exist in neuroscience, it only exists in polyvagal theory, which is sold to us as neuroscience, by the way. I'm very upset that I'd never thought to question these guys for so long, that our body feels safe. And now these are felt experiences that you're going to resonate with. When the ventral vagal zone is active, all of us is active. But when we're ventrally oriented, that's where we feel safe and secure. He says that's where we feel calm and open, that our breath is steady, the heart rate is level, and I think it's really seen as the goal of nervous system is to stay in this ventral vagal state that only exists in polyvagal theory. But okay, fine, that's cool. Then he says, we also have this thing called sympathetic, which is mobilization, which is fight or flight. Fight, flight, freak out, fuck you, oh my God. Woo! Okay, triggers. Automagic reactions. The thing that happens when you're almost in a car accident and everything just gets like, whoa, for a little bit. Okay, so that is sympathetic mobilization. He is Stephen Borges, with whom I have studied directly. He talks about the body being activated and like primed for some kind of thing like that. And then he has this idea of dorsal activation, which is on the back side of us. You could think of this lump right here in this chart from China as where your dorsal fin would be, right here. And he says that dorsal vagal is immobilization. It's the opposite of mobilization. So sympathetic, mobilization, fight or flight. Immobilization, dorsal, freeze, appease. That's how it would fit. The problem is he puts these ideas on a ladder. It's called the polyvagal ladder. There's this woman, Deb Dana, who is lovely. She's a social worker. She's written a lot about polyvagal theory. I like her the best, but let's do the ladder. So a ladder, as you know, has all these rungs on it. And so we have dorsal, shutdown, mobilization, and then we have happy human at the top. And that's weird. I don't have products to add. I'll turn on content disclosure. What did I say that made the computer think I was selling you something? Here we go. Please help me by sharing the live because TikTok just restricted it. Okay, here's the ladder. This polyvagal ladder puts the dorsal shutdown at the base and happy and secure at the top. So I said to myself, okay, well, how would that work in practice? Like, what would I need in order to experience the polyvagal ladder? And I thought, oh, I would actually need a ladder, wouldn't I? And then if I had a ladder, a polyvagal ladder, I would also then need to be able to move up and down the ladder, which implies quite a great deal of actual fucking mobility and ability in my body. I did not have the ability to walk for a period of time, or talk, or read, or count. How the fuck was I supposed to get up a ladder in order to feel safe and secure? I was like, oh my goodness me, I have identified something, right? We don't operate through hierarchy. We also have 3 whole neural networks in our brain, 3 big major neural nets. And I'm not able to get this background up here. They align here as the default mode network, the central executive network, and the salience network. I didn't know about these networks when I wrote the book, Neuroaffective Somatics, so they're not in there. I'm very much not into making things up. But if you look at this, excuse me, default mode, central executive, salience network. These are the rankings of the relative weight, like how heavy is gravity in these networks. The default mode network is the heaviest. That's the motherboard. That is factory settings. This is where we experience rest and digest. On the fucking ground, not at the top of a ladder, literally on the ground. Imagine a time that you were injured, or if you've ever watched the development of a human from birth to walking, we start on the ground. We start as a little mush, right? We're all like curled up. We can't do much. And then the baby starts to kind of like move and understand a little bit. And then babies roll over on their bellies, right? And then we press up. And then we sit up. None of that is happening on a ladder. So if we're having something with the nervous system where it's wonky, metaphorically placing a human on a ladder in order to experience success shows an alignment of polyvagal theory to all supremacy, all empire, and again, psychiatry to the courts. Okay? I don't think that the polyvagal folks want to see people in jail. It is my current belief. I kept myself, what did I do? I stepped out of that scene about 2 years ago, but I think these folks really do think that they're helping. It's just that when the fucking pandemic happened, my friends, okay, in 2020, it was a planetary event. It was a species-wide event. The pandemic was not AIDS 2.0. The technology that we have is so much more velocity, and it happened so fast. And it really put the totality of us a little bit off kilter at the base. Polyvagal theory and all trauma science, the whole trauma industrial complex, is based on the idea that whatever you're resolving, whatever you're looking at, is in the past. That's why they call it post-traumatic stress or chronic post-traumatic stress. The moment that the totality of humanity experienced the same event, the same traumatic event, there was no post. The post was lifted. And instead of changing their science, polyvagal theory dug deeper into itself and began selling tons and tons of courses to your yoga teacher, turning them into neuroscientists, aligned to the court system, not aligned to neuroscience. That's a problem. That's a social problem. That's like a genuine fucking cultural phenomena. It's just not one that I subscribe to. So I was very surprised that my teachers didn't have a way to speak to global. I remember Peter Levine that first year was trying to speak to the experience that the whole planet might be having. And he was really having, I don't know that any of them should have had an easy time, but it was alarming to me that none of them said, whoa, we should, like, we are the leaders of the Queen's Navy. We are the ones. Why are we? They should have changed their science. They just got more and more and more into this concept of regulation. Here's the problem. Where regulation occurs, like where we would experience it and express it, if we're going to stay with this ventral concept, it's in our central executive network. It's in the how are we responding to everything network. It would be in the I'm already okay enough that I can like move and do things aspect of living. And if you have trauma that's deep-seated or profound enough, this little ledge here from your default mode to your central executive, this can feel like trying to scale a mountain. It really can. Our salience network up here at the top, what our salience network does is as information and stimuli comes towards us, that is an afferent thing, AFF, afferent. That's the receiving. This is the ventral, receives. The dorsal responds. And then we have a whole perception zone here in our somatosensory cortex that is blended and complex. So the salience network goes, oh, thank you. You go to the default mode, you go to the central executive. You go to the default mode, you go to the central executive. It's not that direct. It's probably not that simple. That is how at least the research I have access to, discusses these networks in our brain. So if our salience network, the salinity, if the brain itself is impacted, which it is in trauma, which it is with COVID, which it is with AI, which it is just because of the fact of existing, if the salience network isn't functioning ideally, it might be parsing not perfectly. But that's not a hierarchy. That is like water flowing down a river. Salience network operates as like the guiding bird in a flock of birds. There's that one bird in the front. Salience network aligns very specifically to our experience of cerebral spinal fluid, not our fucking vagus nerve. Also, we have 12 cranial nerves, not just one. So I also was noticing that the way that polyvagal theory identifies the body, parts of the body, as dorsal and ventral, as the front end or back end, that is not how our brain stem experiences itself. And our vagus nerve leaves the brain through the brain stem. The way the brain stem experiences itself is through something called rostral caudal. Rostral caudal, that's the folding in. This poor doll. It's the geometry of gestation is rostral caudal. And when I was speaking earlier about how when babies are learning how to move and they get on their belly and they press up, that's a rostral caudal movement. That's not dorsal ventral. Why the fuck is he using dorsal ventral to describe something that's occurring in the brainstem? I would like to know. I make things up all the time. So I'm not like opposed to creating new language, but it feels to me now after, say, 15 years in this space, it feels to me that where polyvagal theory could use what's already present in neuroscience and say, and here's how it can help us with our lived experience, it feels like the choice was, I'm just going to create a new word and turn it into something I can sell. And he's selling it through mental health. He's not selling it through neuroscience. Totally okay. But again, if something only exists in psychiatry, then it exists as a tool of the state. It exists as a tool of empire. It exists as colonial construct. It exists as supremacy. It exists that way also in other fields, but very, very much in psychology and wellness. And putting humans into a hierarchy and saying that the success is meaning you are at the very top of the chain. If the failure is anywhere other than at the top, how the fuck do you get back up to the top? How do you get back up? Well, one way you get back up, if you ask me, is you shift the language of directions to the body away from dorsal, ventral, medial, lateral, superior, inferior. You go, no. Whole human, dimensional human. We have 3 axes in our body. The transverse axis, the sagittal, and then here's the corona. X, Y, Z axis. And once you start contemplating human as whole and axial, it shifts how the human is viewed, away from you are on my table, I'm going to cut you open, I understand your body through what all of my dissections, and towards you're a whole ass human bound to earth gravity, not the gravity of my table. And how is your body responding to what you are experiencing in your life? And that's going to be unique for each of us. It's also the case, there's no such thing as a steady state that is also always regulated. That's not how we operate as complex systems that are inherently open. It's one of the reasons I love this chart, because it shows the whole human as an open. Do you see how open this is? This is all open. Even if I put a little ring around it, like as though it was our skin, there's a lot of space in here. Homeostasis occurs at the level of our cells. Homeostasis is something like our digestive system is seeking. Homeostasis is so it occurs in more closed systems. The word for stability in dynamic states is homeoresis. There's a whole fucking word. Unknown 369. I did not know about homeoresis. I have seeded so many goddamn neural nets. I've built so many libraries. I never knew about the word homeoresis until a couple years ago. Homeoresis is, it is when dynamic systems experience stability in dynamic states, which is what we're seeking in regulation, right? It's I have capacity to respond to what's happening, or I have the time and space to learn how to respond, or any number of things. So it's called homeoresis. Homeostasis is what our systems experience. Homeoresis is what we experience. And homeoresis requires 3 dimensions, not 2. 3 dimensions. A hierarchy, a flow chart of ventral vagal, dorsal, sympathetic. This is just in my book. That is not 3 factors. Okay, 3 would be default mode, central executive, salience, or it could be body, mind, spirit, or the 3 types of neurons that we have: afferent, which are only receiving; efferent, which only respond; and blended, which do both. So afferent receives, that's that front end. Efferent goes to our motor cortex, which in the front part of our brain, action, and then wax on, wax off, blended. Our vagus nerve is a blended nerve. So is the vestibulocochlear nerve, and 2 more, but I don't know what they are off the top of my head, and we're just not going to worry about it. So if the states of the arousal, if sympathetic, parasympathetic, if that language works for you and the metaphor works for you, then I am not suggesting you step out of the metaphor. If the metaphor feels forceful or like something you have to fit into, I might have another metaphor that you could add on. But I'm not saying my metaphor is going to work any better. I'm just saying, if it goes all the way back to China becoming China and predates acupuncture by thousands of years, maybe. And Chinese medicine is oriented towards complex and chronic experiences. Like, I wouldn't go to a Chinese medicine doctor for my cancer, but I went for the pain of my cancer, right? I would go to a doctor to get my bone reset. Oh, actually, a good example is I had a knee injury I was roughhousing with a partner, we'll say, and he went to do take me down, and I just didn't see where his foot was, and it hit my kneecap, and it pushed my kneecap off my, like, out of place on my knee. And I remember there was an orthopedic surgeon in the play space at the time, so I was immediately cared for. We got the knee back in to place, and then I was like, I had to ice and everything. I couldn't walk for 2 days. I don't know why I told you that. Because I went to an acupuncturist to address the swelling and to address the tissue. But I went to a place with an x-ray to make sure I didn't break or tear anything. Okay. So there's this whole concept of the window of tolerance as well, that we have hypoarousal, which is shut down, or in affective neuroscience, it would be low arousal. We have hyperarousal. Affective neuroscience takes it all the way up to mania, but it could be just like joy, dancing, whatever. And then somewhere in the middle is what he calls the window of tolerance. It is not the window of equanimity. It is how much can you and I take? How much can we tolerate before the heart goes, the eyes start going, the blood flow changes? It's based on tolerance, stress tolerance. And I think it's because it's easier to measure that. Again, I'm not saying, I was just very surprised that all of neuroscience hasn't adopted polyvagal theory as a standard model, and it hasn't. If I go and read, I was just reading a study on how our brain interprets and responds to emotions. The vagus nerve was nowhere in there, but our brain networks were. The networks in our brains were. The amygdala was our emotion center in the brain. Temporal lobe was how we experience time, but not our vagus nerve. Asking one thread in a tapestry to correct the tapestry when the thread moves on its own is bonkers. It's absolute bonkers to me. Your vagus nerve, we can be so kind and give it a lovely environment. I love contemplating this ox here as the vagus nerve because the relationship that the ox herd has to the ox is pleasant and kind, but the ox has a mind of its own, y'all. And those things are beasts, right? Water buffalo. But this would be a great way to contemplate your vagus nerve. It exits your brain, though, through the brain stem. But it experiences itself all throughout our body, It's called the wandering nerve. One of the other words for it is wandering nerve. So what is the wandering aspect of vagus became my primary contemplation. I think also polyvagal theory lacks cultural competence. Polyvagal theory makes it easy to label children with behavior problems so that you don't see different kinds of neurodivergencies. Just the fact that polyvagal theory centers smiling as a sign of social engagement, there are cultures that don't smile. Do they not have social engagement? What about different kinds of tissue experiences in the face that might make it challenging? Down syndrome, autism. Do those humans not experience safety? What about if somebody is Black? You're much more likely to be labeled schizophrenic than you are autistic. Polyvagal theory does not have a lot of space for neurodivergencies either. And it's my position that a traumatized brain is a neurodivergency. It changes our brain. Trauma changes the brain. And sometimes those changes are permanent. And if a human has had enough trauma that there are different steady states, that the default setting has changed, is it compassionate and kind to then ask and expect that human to operate and function as though they don't have that experience? I don't think it is. I think nervous system regulation also, as a meme, tends to turn skinny white yoga chicks into cops. It turns us into cops. We become the determining factor of whether or not you're regulated. You come to us and we say, nervous system regulation happens this way. And then you go, okay, that's how it happens. And if you're not having that experience, or you're not having nervous system regulation. This is all very easy for me to say because I'm not the one publishing research. So let's just acknowledge that. But it's very, very surprising to me. And so when I put the human on ground as though a human is alive, okay, and able to speak for themselves, you cannot contemplate a human through the lines of dissection and still be contemplating a human as whole. Dorsal, ventral, superior, inferior, medial, lateral, all of those words are words of dissection. They're not words of complete. So the words of complete human are sagittal, which is this blue line, the cyan, coronal, which is this magenta line, and transverse, which is this line here at the waist. And those are the three ways our brains are imaged when neuroscience is studying our brains. So I thought that was a real nice shift, because it then says, if you're neurodivergent, if you're indigenous, if you're Latinx, if you have a bipolar label, if you have whatever experience, how is it for you? And how can a provider or a helper begin to understand your lived experience and provide scaffolding? It's just like what we do for children. I don't think that trauma healing at the level of human is any more than it is learning and creating new patterns of recognition, patterns of response. Thank you. I'm going to say goodbye to my friends over here because I've been on for about 45 minutes. I try to keep it to that.